and welcome to this inspiring dialogue with Katie Hendricks. I am really excited about this conversation, first of all, because it's with Katie, who's someone that I have admired for many years. And for those who do not know her, she has an illustrious background, so many things that could be said. But what she wants people to know is that she's been in the field both as an entrepreneur as well as an author and transformation teacher for over 40 years, doing both. And she's been inspiring people and making a living for a very long time, which is actually something that not that many people have managed to do until more recently, I think. You know, you've been out there for such a long time. And she is married to Gay Hendricks, and together they've written so many books and inspired so many people. And she said something that I love, which is that they consider their life to be a living laboratory. And that's really true if you know them. They're always reinventing themselves and new ideas and entrepreneurial things. And it's really inspiring that you stay so excited and you're always this foment of creativity. So it's a joy to have you.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
What a pleasure to be here and to be able to be here in your home and also to be able to share what is evolving right now in especially how to come home to yourself in the middle of turbulent times. And I think that's really the task of our time. And I also think that we're up to it. I was, as I was meditating this morning, what came to me was the phrase "love with a spine," and to me that really demonstrates both ends of the poles that I think that women especially are moving into right now, is letting their love be visible, but letting that be backed up with a spine, the ability to say no, the ability to check and see, is this in alignment for me? Is this in alignment with my purpose? Am I really coming from my own authoring of myself, or am I reacting and managing? Because we're all trained to do that and have been for thousands of years. So this whole inside out emergence that we're doing now, I think is very exciting.
It is exciting
to be a part of. And that also, I think what we're doing when we create love with a spine is that we can stand as part of a new context, part of a new container, where there's much more freedom for people to invent and to invent new structures rather than just trying to undo the old ones. Because there's so much that's going on right now about, you know, fight back and be against and the resistance. And I really want people to be focusing on what new structures do we want to create and how can we co-create that with all of our partners, with women, with men, with animals, with the planet.
Yeah, wow. And I want to dive in with this more, they're talking about the spine, because it's resonating with me deeply. Before we dive in too deeply, would you just help us align with our spine and just do a centering? Because I think everyone out there probably could use that. I know I could too.
Well, the way that I love to come home to myself is by first creating a pleasant So I invite you to let yourself create a pleasant through a whole out breath. And with that, to give yourself some curious attention. Just letting that like ripple over you so that you're being with yourself. And then let the let you become aware of where you are right now. So giving your attention to the room where you are or the people that you're with. And then giving attention to yourself again. This practice of giving yourself awareness and attention is so enriching. We're so good at giving it out. So let yourself really shower that over yourself. And anytime you want to create curiosity, you can do that through this whether you do it out loud or inside yourself. So it's a major way of centering while being present, so that I don't have to take myself away to be centered. I want to be in action, but from being in myself, and then also available to be present and connect with others.
I'm laughing you say this because Stephen and I both use that tool, and it is so grounding. And my family members who are not necessarily in the same transformational world,
Yes.
often if they're mocking us, they'll say, Exactly.
Yeah, so all of these things can be used as weapons, but
helpful though too.
yeah, they're very, very helpful, because even if you're making that in a mocking sense, it does create, it shifts you from critical brain to wonder brain. And then that erases what so many of us do, and I think especially women do, is notice themselves with criticism. You know, there's always this not enough, you know, not perfect, you know, got to do something better. So letting that kind of open, curious attention, giving that to yourself is such a major nutrient that I really like to emphasize that.
I like that word, nutrient.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to bring back what we originally were going to talk about here and weave in this what I call the fierce feminine, the feminine with the spine,
Yes.
those two pieces. I was asking her what we might talk about, and as we were discussing that, I was saying I really wanted a conversation that would be very relevant for what's going on in the world, and how do we take all of the depth of our spiritual practice and really put it into work and into service in a much more grounded, practical way than many of us perhaps have needed to do. The times are really calling that from each of us. And you talked about fear. And I think that there is so much fear as we look around at the world. It's hard to, you know, not feel some wave of fear as you turn on the news every day. And the number of really difficult things that are going on our planet is so...
Very disturbing.
It's very disturbing.
Yeah.
And so I thought this was a really fascinating topic and so appropriate and important. So let's just dive right in with that.
Yeah, I've been passionate about... Well, I've seen the fear trance that more and more people are living inside of and not aware of, especially, I think, since 9/11 for sure. But, you know, I got born into that. I was born in 1948. The atom bomb had just gone off 3 years before. I grew up during the duck and cover time where we really thought that we were going to die any minute. My whole block in our neighborhood when I was growing up, everybody had bomb shelters except us.
Wow.
So, you know, it was really
Where was that?
It was in the Midwest. I can't remember if it was in Indiana, Michigan, or Kansas.
And everyone there has bomb shelters?
And everybody had bomb shelters in the 50s. So we think of this as being a relatively new thing, but I think that the fear atmosphere has been growing for a very long time, and that people are not aware that at the root of all problems is fear, and that we mistake being, you know, like, for example, fight back. Fight is an expression of fear. You know, there are 4 expressions of fear: fight, flee, freeze, and faint. And so if we are telling people to fight back, we're encouraging fear. And then operating, and then everybody just stays in the fear trance, and then it escalates because you get a hit of adrenaline when you have that fear, and that's in order to propel you to do something and to do something in an emergency. But if it's all an emergency, not only does your body you just can't cope with that.
I think that's part of why there's so much adrenal fatigue, which has become really a epidemic
it's
for
a
women.
thing now, because you know, almost everybody has adrenal fatigue because we keep, you know, sparking
fear
it.
And also probably the push too, I think,
and then to push
manifest
through it,
right.
and we're gonna. So the big question that I've been asking over the last few years is it possible to turn fear into flow? Because another mistake that people make about fear is that we can get rid of it, you know, or we can get free of it, like become fearless, which, you know, is physiologically impossible because we're wired up for fear. It's really necessary for us to be able to respond, bypassing our problem-solving brain in an emergency. Right. You don't want to take the time to debate the pros and cons when there's, like a truck approaching you. Your body goes into all of those resources that you've got in the parts of your brain that are not connected to your logical brain. But when you live there all the time,
Right.
you don't have access to your problem-solving brain or your empathetic brain. You live in reptilian world. And what I see in the movies is that the reptilian brain has gotten bigger and bigger. But the problem with fear and adrenaline is that we have to keep escalating to get the adrenaline
the same rush.
hit.
Yeah.
So we blow up more things. If you look at the superhero movies, they're just, everything is getting bigger and bigger and more and more. And
yeah, I don't go to a lot of superhero movies, but I went to one because I wanted to see Wonder Woman.
Exactly,
and
me
I was
too.
like, "Whoa!"
I know, me too. I felt pinned to my chair, and that it really wasn't very different than any other action movie.
Yeah, I have to say, I was still a war paradigm, which I was pretty disappointed. I was excited by certain aspects, but it's like we're still at war here.
Yes,
this is,
Yeah, and the sense that that's in what I would call an adaptive context, that I don't think it's going to serve anybody for women to become more like men and to be able to be warriors. I think we've always been warriors in a way that's less visible. So, we stand for connection and for the protection of children and the protection of the planet. And there's a fierceness about that.
Right.
But if we're trying to go through that little narrow opening that doesn't really go anywhere, it just keeps the sense of what we call the drama triangle of the villain, the victim, and the hero. It just keeps that going. So one of the things I've really focused on is that it's possible with some simple movements to liberate the energy of fear so that you have access to that energy.
So it's just energy taking the charge away, but accessing the energy that's there for something.
And the huge amount of energy that's tied up in fear. So when you do what I call moving from fear to flow, what happens then is you become resourceful. You become response able. So rather than being, like if I'm stuck in a freeze, I can't do anything. And if someone says, well, just relax, right, then you get more of, there's nothing to be scared of. Those are ways that we try to push ourselves through fear. But there are these simple movements that I've developed, and I have a YouTube video and an animation that people can look at. But basically, the movements are very simple. One of them is oozing. One of them is sumo, where you really get down and feel yourself in your hips, so you're centered, and that's to the antidote for flee.
And maybe, why don't I just slow you down for a second, because I'm sure everyone who's watching would love to actually learn these movements as long as we're here. So
we could do a little mini here in the chair, because usually I do it standing. But so if you make,
should we stand? Would it work to stand?
We'd have to reconfigure.
No, it's totally fine. We can just, because often this happens like you're sitting in a meeting. And you can have the same experience and, at a more subtle level.
Great.
So let's just go through each of the fear responses and then the fear melter. And then I'll show you how you can
the fear melter.
The fear melter. This is what I call them, is fear melters, because then you get to use that energy. So what most of us are really used to is the fight. So if you make like a stance like a boxer, and you got to get your chin out and you go, oh yeah, and that, can you feel?
Don't mess with me.
That's don't mess with me. That's right.
Don't mess with me.
Don't mess with me. Yeah. And can you feel the little hit of adrenaline from that?
Yeah. And there's something empowering about it too, like that part, especially if you're a woman that hasn't had access to this more fierce energy. There's something that's empowering about it.
Yes.
But then it sort of gets a little confusing.
Because there's adrenaline attached. See, you get that spike of adrenaline, but then it wears off very quickly. And then you have that drained feeling, and not the ability to take your mobilization forward into some kind of successful action. So if you go back into this again, the big confusion here is, am I scared or am I angry? And I want people to assume first that they're scared. And then the fear melter is oozing. So I like people to imagine that they're moving like seaweed. and especially through your shoulders, or like hot fudge over ice cream. And notice that you cannot fight when you're oozing. So it gives you, again, that gives you that opening where you have it. I can see in your face there's this kind of,
It is. Well, it's funny because, you
Yeah.
know, I was dancing earlier today, and kind of given what's going on in the collective, I feel like I need a place to move energy. And so I was noticing that I was doing a lot of this kind of energy, this
Yes.
naturally, this oozing to
The-
kind of
yeah.
counteract the, like, what feels very angular out in the world right now.
and also very defensive. So when I go into ooze, then what I've been doing recently is doing Fear Melters Plus. So I'd have the ooze, and then what I might want to ask is, what's my next choice? Okay, or how could I navigate this? What's one step that I could take here? Or I could add a to the ooze, and then I have more choice. Or I could take a breath and notice my breath. So if you add a Fear Melter Plus, it takes you into action in a new direction. And that's what's really exciting. So the second one, the flee, we can just do it by, you know, like I'm sitting straight and then I start moving a shoulder away. I'm fleeing. I'm not quite here. And people can do that also just with head, like you can move your head back. Like if somebody's cornering you at a party and you can't get away, and people flee up. I see this often in seminars. Well, people will go, well, this is all very interesting, but what if? You know, like what if when I go home? And that's a flee forward. Or people flee
Just
up
a disassociation, just
yes,
not check out
I'm
altogether.
not here.
Right.
I have fleed. And so it's very, very, that's a very common one. And it's not quite as obvious as the fight. But flee, when I do that, I get kind of diffuse and feel like I'm not in myself. So the Fear Melter for this one is sumo. And if you were standing,
I love that you've got a little name for each of
oh,
these.
I do,
This
absolutely.
is the entrepreneur side.
That's right, and I have an icon for each one.
Okay.
So what you would do, and you can do this seated also, is that you let your weight shift from one hip to the other so you can feel your sits bones. When you're standing, what you do is just bend your knees. You kind of do a semi-squat and put your hands on your hips so that you can feel yourself. I also like to invite people to feel their feet. So you can feel the energy moving down. And when I do that, I locate myself. I'm here.
Yeah.
And again, I can use that Fear Melter with then a plus. So that might be to say something that's true for me right now. That's like, I just realized I was feeling afraid and I really want to resolve this. So I'm saying what I want. That's a really great move. Rather than or I have to solve the problem before I can say what I want. So that's for flee.
Yeah, and I think it's also that what you're saying what you want is something that's really, a lot of women in particular need practice, places to practice doing that, because many of us, especially, it depends on what it is. If it's something that's really, you know, an easy thing, but it's more like those things that you know are going to be unpopular.
Right.
You know that even saying what you want, which might be against what everyone else wants, or speaking to something in the room that is going on that people don't want to mention. And so I feel like some of these postures are for bringing, you know, what I call the fierce feminine, and you've used that word too. That's not angry, but it has an intensity to it.
Well, what I was just getting from what you were saying is that occupying ourselves out to the edges is one of the most powerful things that women can do.
Yeah,
because we're so good at
accommodating, or I'm fine, I don't really need anything, and it's
getting
like
smaller and making room for others, and making sure that there's space for everybody else, and all of those contract us so that we're not really occupying ourselves. And that's one of the things I love about the Fear Melters, is that you can feel your power in your body, and that then becomes very obvious. Whether you say anything or not, you're here. And that presence, I think, has such power and such a resonance and a ripple for other people as well. So then the the third one is freeze.
Yeah.
So that's my personal favorite, where you just tighten everything. And what happens then is you don't breathe. Can you feel that too? So the freeze, the fear melter, is to wiggle either your fingers and or your toes. And what that does is, even if you're frozen, so if you freeze
Which happens
everything,
on a subtle level. It's not always like but I
Right.
notice, or you just want to hide.
there's
that feeling,
you want to just
disappear.
get invisible. Yeah, so even if you're frozen, you can wiggle your fingers and toes. And then what I like to invite people to do is to let that wiggling move up through your body. I was just remembering from the debates last year. I don't know if you remember in one of the debates where Hillary did this. It was a moment that people asked me if I'd been teaching her fear melters, because she did this. She did a wiggle, and it changed the whole atmosphere changed when she did that, because she was frozen and then she wiggled. So just a little wiggle can be very powerful to bring you present again, so that you can act. And then the last one that is not as familiar to people is a feint. So if you feel your energy draining, just sort of draining on the floor, or you have a moment where you get confused and you can't think of the word.
I think it's overwhelm, comes a lot where people,
Yes.
that's kind of the response when
That's
people,
happening so much now. There's so much coming at us that it's like, that sense of overwhelm is a feint.
And kind of the confusion of like, where do I even
how do
begin
how do I start? So the fear melter for that we call love scoops. And I like people to imagine that there's a pool of love, and I actually scoop some up and I bring it in and give it to myself. And I can also feel like, I can feel a little tension right here in the back of my neck, so I can love scoop here. And when
put it wherever in your
you
body.
put it wherever, and it's important that you actually give that to yourself, so that you can, here I am, and you literally love yourself until you start to feel, oh, okay, I'm here. Oh, I can feel my energy returning, and then from that we can invent all kinds of new solutions, because we become response able rather than reactive, because all of our fear responses are totally reactive. But if I'm in myself, I can create new connections, I can create new solutions, I can enjoy the process of moving from here to there, rather than it's all hard work. And
And what I love about this, when you just did the love scoop, it's so beautiful. A lot of these mudras are, I would call them mudras, they're new in the way that you're presenting them. But I spent some time in India. And in India, they have this beautiful ceremony that happens called the arti, and they bring these lamps. So have you been to India?
I have not.
Okay, so they bring these beautiful fire lamps as part of the evening ceremonies on the Ganges River. And when there's beautiful lights, and literally what people are doing is the same thing you're calling the love scoop, but they're taking that light and they're bringing it into, into their head and into their heart.
Oh,
and
that's wonderful.
they're just taking, physically these, light, but it's the same kind of thing of feeding their own body and being. And some people turn, backwards, but it's inviting in the light. And so I think, doing visualization, as you're saying, and that we create that as we do it. I remember spending so many times and lifting my energy through doing that. And so I love that you're coming up with another version without the, cumbersome big lamps. But
right, and also that we can do anytime, anywhere. And then I think our task now is to move from fear to flow to real presence, which allows us to connect with others, which I think is the great need of our time, that people are longing for actually connecting with themselves and with others, and then we can collaborate to create new solutions. Yeah. And that's what I'm up to.
Well, that is wonderful. That's so fun. One of the things I didn't mention about your background is I know you have a long background in dance and body intelligence. And so I loved seeing how you're weaving, the full body experience and then getting people to be in a place of being resourced. Yes. Which is so critical now, I think. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just, Right. Good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably all we have time for today, but thank you, everyone, for being with us here, and thank you. That was
Oh,
really fun.
thank you. That was
And
so
I'm
much fun.
excited to be using these in my life.
Super.
And if you have feedback about this experience and you want to share on our Facebook page, we'd love to hear how these exercises are working for you. And thanks to all.
Thank you. And thank you.
You're welcome.